In the late 1990s, the United States was going through an apparently peaceful phase. The economy was growing, the internet was beginning to gain popularity, and the youth seemed promising. But not everything was as it seemed. It was in this context that one of the most impactful events in recent American history occurred. A crime that not only shook the country but changed forever how we view school safety. The state chosen for this sad chapter was Colorado, one of the most populous and developed states in the United States. There, away from the major urban centers, was the city of Littleton. Littleton is a small, quiet, suburban town, surrounded by mountains and nature. It's exactly the kind of place where no one would expect something so violent and unexpected. And it was precisely there, in the heart of that peaceful setting, that one of the most shocking tragedies in world history arose. A massacre planned with coldness and executed with brutality. The exact location of the attack was Columbine High School, a public institution serving the community for decades. With nearly 2,000 students, it was a typical school in rural America. The date chosen by the criminals to commit their act was April 20th, 1999. A sunny Tuesday, like so many others, which soon became a day of absolute terror. Even before entering the school armed, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold had already prepared the ground. Their plan went far beyond random shootings. The teenagers, both students at the school itself, spent months putting together a complex and dangerous scheme. It included homemade bombs, car bombs, and even distractions for firefighters. They wanted to cause maximum damage, not only physically, but symbolically. They wanted to leave a bloody mark on the society they believed ignored them. Their initial goal was to detonate bombs during lunchtime when the cafeteria was full. Then, they intended to kill those who survived and escape like heroes from a distorted movie. But not everything went as planned. The bombs didn't detonate as expected, which drastically changed the original plan. Still, the two proceeded with the massacre. They entered the school with weapons and began shooting mercilessly, spreading fear and panic among the students. What started as a planned attack turned into real chaos. Teachers tried to protect the students, while police arrived without knowing what they were about to face. On that sunny Tuesday morning in April 1999, students at Columbine High School were preparing for another typical day of classes. Some arrived in groups, others parked their bikes, while teachers organized the classrooms. No one imagined that this routine would be brutally interrupted by two students who carried not only backpacks, but lethal weapons and a strong will to destroy lives. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold entered the school around 11:19 a.m. They wore dark clothes and appeared calm, but inside them burned a gruesome and well-thought-out plan. They carried shotguns, revolvers, knives, and vests full of ammunition. In addition, they had filming equipment to record everything, as if they were producing a realistic horror movie. Their first target was the school cafeteria, where they intended to detonate homemade bombs during the busiest hour. However, something went wrong. The explosives did not work as expected. Despite that, the two decided to continue with the attack. They went up to the upper parking lot and shot at the glass ceiling of the main entrance, scaring everyone around them. Shortly after, they walked toward the front of the school and began randomly shooting at parked vehicles. A teacher who was leaving for lunch saw what was happening and tried to warn his colleagues. Meanwhile, inside the school, students heard the first gunshots. Many thought it was just a false alarm or a bad joke. But reality was much worse. The gunfire continued, and soon it became clear that something serious was happening. Teachers rushed to close doors and hide their students, while panic spread through the hallways. In the cafeteria, some students remained seated at the tables, unaware of the imminent danger. That was where Eric and Dylan decided to enter first, guns in hand. It was at that moment that screams dominated the place. The two young men fired indiscriminately, hitting whoever was in front of them. The confusion was total. Students fled desperately. Some fell to the floor seeking shelter. Others tried to escape through windows. No one knew what to do in the face of such atrocities. One of the first injured was Matthew Kechter, a student at the same school, who received a grazing bullet wound. He managed to run away, barely saving his life. Another student, Daniel Rohrbaugh, was one of the first to receive a fatal shot. He fell to the floor of the cafeteria, surrounded by friends who could do nothing. Those first minutes were crucial in understanding the severity of the attack. What seemed like a normal day had turned into a real battlefield. In the next session, we will learn the stories of the victims and the most emotional moments experienced by those who survived. The massacre at Columbine High School resulted in the deaths of 13 people in total, 12 students and 1 teacher. Each of these victims had dreams, stories, and a promising future that was brutally cut short. Among them was Rachel Scott, the first fatality of the attack. She was known for her charisma and for writing inspiring phrases in her journal about kindness and compassion. Rachel was sitting outside the school with her friend Craig Scott, her brother, when Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold passed by shooting. Craig survived, but he had to watch helplessly as his sister was killed. Another victim was Daniel Rohrbaugh, who had just turned 15. He was one of the first students hit inside the cafeteria. His friends tried to help him, but they couldn't stop the bleeding. Cassidy Stay, Rachel Scott's cousin, was near the scene of the attack and witnessed everything unfold. She hid with other classmates under a table and pretended to be dead to avoid a tragic fate. Many students survived thanks to their bravery and presence of mind. Some hid in closets, others ran through the hallways until they found locked classrooms where they could protect themselves. Dave Sanders, one of the school's teachers, became the only adult fatality in the attack. Although wounded, he continued helping other students escape, risking his own life. During the shooting, Dave went outside to warn other students who were entering the school, unaware of the danger. He was hit by gunfire and died hours later, never reaching the hospital. The way the students handled that moment shows how fear can transform ordinary people into silent heroes. Many put the safety of others above their own. An example is Austin Eubanks, who was in the library with his friend Brooks Brown. When the attackers entered, Austin was hit by a gunshot and was seriously injured. Brooks tried to protect him but was also injured. Austin survived, but carried physical and emotional scars for the rest of his life. In later interviews, he described how that experience led him to face addictions and seek redemption by helping others. There were also students who used technology to call for help. A group managed to contact the police using a teacher's phone, describing in real time what was happening. These testimonies provided valuable clues to authorities, but unfortunately the response was delayed. The lack of communication between security forces worsened the situation inside the school. Even after the shooting ended, many of the survivors physically suffered long-term consequences. Some developed post-traumatic stress disorder, others never returned to a normal routine. These stories are a painful reminder of how a single day can completely change the course of a life. In the next session, we will better understand who Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold were, and what the dynamic was between them during the attack. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold were friends since high school, but although they were close, they were completely different personalities. One was dominant and filled with hatred, the other more introspective and vulnerable. Eric was considered the leader of the duo. Intelligent, manipulative, and extremely hostile, he harbored deep feelings of revenge against the society that, according to him, despised him. His journals reveal a profile close to a psychopath. Dylan, on the other hand, was quieter, withdrawn, and seemed to suffer from severe depression. He had feelings of inadequacy and low self-esteem, making him susceptible to Eric's influence. They met at the start of high school and gradually began distancing themselves from their peers. While other students made new friends, they increasingly withdrew, creating their own dark universe. Eric and Dylan shared interests in violent games, action movies, and extremist ideas. They were also fascinated by the movie A Clockwork Orange, which glorified chaos and social disorder. Over time, the two began planning violent acts. At first, they were only fantasies and conversations in online forums. But little by little, those ideas became real plans. Eric was primarily responsible for the bombs and logistics of the attack. He recorded videos explaining how to build explosives and even stole chemical materials from a local company. Dylan, in turn, helped build the homemade weapons and filmed part of the process. Although less active in the preparations, he was fully involved in the final decisions. The relationship between them was complex. There were moments of complicity, but also tension. In some videos recorded before the attack, it is evident that Dylan seemed hesitant, while Eric was determined. Eric had an almost megalomaniacal vision of the attack. He wanted to cause the highest number of deaths possible, surpassing all previous school attacks. Dylan, on the other hand, seemed more motivated by emotional pain than by the desire to kill. On the day of the attack, Eric took the role of leader. It was he who decided where to shoot first, where to place the bombs, and who would be priority targets. Nevertheless, Dylan did not hesitate. He shot without mercy, followed orders, and actively participated in everything. This shows how fundamental Eric's influence was in carrying out the plan. They used walkie-talkies to communicate inside the school, which allowed them to move strategically. Every step seemed rehearsed like in a well-produced movie. After injuring several people, they entered the library, where they found frightened and hiding students. There, they continued shooting and causing terror until they heard the approaching police. It was at that moment that the final plan came into play: to die as martyrs, leaving behind a legacy of fear and confusion. In the next session, we will further analyze the use of bombs and what happened with the explosive devices they prepared. The Columbine High School massacre was not just a random shooting. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold carefully planned a coordinated attack, including the use of homemade bombs to increase the number of victims. They wanted chaos to begin even before entering the school. That is why they prepared 2 large propane tanks filled with gasoline and nails, placed inside the school cafeteria. The idea was to detonate these bombs during lunch hour, when the place was full of students. This way, they would cause hundreds of deaths, according to their distorted calculations. In addition, they left 99 explosive devices scattered around the building, in fake backpacks, lockers, and even in the parking lot. Many were fake, but some could cause real damage. Eric and Dylan also prepared car bombs, vehicles loaded with explosives that they intended to use to escape or attack new targets after the initial assault. To make sure firefighters were distracted and did not arrive quickly, the two started small fires strategically located in different parts of the city, far from the school. But not everything went as expected. The propane tanks in the cafeteria did not explode as planned. The ignition failed and the bombs remained intact, an error that would change the course of the attack. Despite this, the two decided to proceed with the original plan. Instead of waiting for the explosion, they entered the school armed and immediately began shooting at anyone who appeared in front of them. Students and teachers would only discover hours later that there was a real ticking bomb in the cafeteria, and that, if it had worked, the death toll would have been much higher. Authorities found the 2 intact tanks and carefully deactivated them. Every minute counted, as the building was still full of injured and hiding students. If the explosives had detonated, the cafeteria would have been completely destroyed. Later studies indicate the explosion could have killed more than 500 people. This revelation shocked the country. Until then, school shootings were seen as tragic but isolated events. With Columbine, it became clear that teenagers could plan something close to domestic terrorism. The use of homemade bombs also sparked debates about access to dangerous materials and how teenagers could build such lethal devices without raising suspicion. Eric and Dylan recorded videos explaining how to build bombs and where to find the ingredients. These records were later used as evidence in investigations and documentaries. Although the bombs did not explode, the attack was devastating. In the next session, we will analyze how the police responded to the attack, what mistakes were made, and why the operation took so long. When the first gunshots echoed through Columbine High School, authorities were immediately alerted. But the way they responded to the attack generated strong criticism and questions that remain today. The shooting began around 11:19 a.m. Minutes later, local officers were already arriving on site, but they did not immediately enter the building, a decision that would be controversial. Officers followed the protocol of the time, which stated that in cases of multiple shooters, the ideal was to contain the perimeter and wait for the arrival of a specialized tactical team. This protocol was created for situations where there were hostages or possible negotiations. In the case of Columbine, this meant leaving students inside the school under constant gunfire for more than an hour. Meanwhile, inside the school, cries for help multiplied. Teachers and students desperately called the police asking for immediate assistance, but nothing happened. Some officers tried to enter through side doors, but were met with gunfire coming from the second floor. This reinforced the decision to wait for reinforcements before moving forward. However, later reports would show that Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold were no longer in the hallways after the first few minutes. They were in the library, shooting at whoever appeared in front of them. This means many of the injured students could have been rescued much earlier than the final police entry. The lost time was crucial for the number of victims. Confusion was also present. Law enforcement received conflicting information. Some reported multiple shooters, others mentioned explosives in several rooms. There were rumors that more bombs could detonate at any moment. Some students reported hearing walkie-talkies with strange voices, further fueling fear and uncertainty. Around 12:20 p.m., almost an hour after the shooting began, SWAT agents finally entered the school. It was a fast and precise operation, but it was already too late. In the library, they found the two attackers dead. They had committed suicide upon realizing they could not escape. The chaos had ended, but the trauma would remain forever. After the attack, an independent investigation pointed out that at least 5 victims might have survived if there had been a faster response from the police. This analysis changed forever how the United States handles school shootings. New protocols were created, prioritizing the immediate entry of armed officers into active shooter situations. The legacy of this slow response served as a global warning. In these events, every second counts. In the next session, we will explore how the media covered the event and the impact this exposure had on the country. The massacre at Columbine High School was not just a local tragedy. It became a national and international news story within hours. Shortly after the shooting began, television networks like CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC interrupted their programming to broadcast live coverage directly from Colorado. Reporters rushed to the scene, setting up bases in front of the school. Images of desperate parents, ambulances rushing away, and security forces surrounding the building were shown non-stop. The internet was still rising at the time, but news sites and online forums were already discussing what had happened. The entire world seemed to be watching Littleton. The first report spoke of multiple shooters, bombs spread throughout the school, and even rumors that a third person was involved. Many of these details were later disproven, but the initial impact was huge. President Bill Clinton made an official statement the same day, expressing solidarity with the victims and promising to review policies related to youth violence and gun ownership. The media also brought attention to the image of the 2 young killers. Photos of Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold were widely shared, along with excerpts from their journals and home videos. These images and testimonies shocked the country. They clearly showed how planned the attack was, its coldness, and desire to cause terror. Some called it a horror show. Magazines like Time, Newsweek, and People dedicated entire covers to the case. Documentaries and special programs were produced in the following weeks, keeping the topic always in the spotlight. Hollywood also reacted quickly. Screenplays were written, film projects emerged, and debates about cultural influences on young people gained strength, especially regarding violent video games and movies with shooting scenes. Many experts pointed out American culture's violence, questioning whether movies, songs, and games were normalizing aggression among youth. But not all analyses were deep. Part of the sensationalist press took advantage of the family's suffering, seeking scandals and culprits, often without respecting the pain of the victims. Additionally, conspiracy theories emerged blaming alternative religions, ethnic minorities, and even the federal government, theories that persist today in certain internet circles. The intense coverage helped keep the issue in the public agenda for years, but it also contributed to the phenomenon known as the Columbine effect, where other youths began to idealize the attack and try to imitate it. The way the media handled the case served as a warning for future similar events. The importance of reporting responsibly, without glorifying criminals or ignoring the victims. In the next session, we will dive into the psychological analysis of Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, trying to understand what led 2 teenagers to commit such horror. The Columbine massacre shocked the world not only because of the violence, but because it was committed by 2 teenagers who, on the surface, seemed normal. But who really were Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold? Eric was described as intelligent, charismatic, and manipulative. However, beneath that facade lay a deeply disturbed mind. His journals reveal clear signs of antisocial personality disorder and possibly psychopathy. He harbored generalized hatred toward humanity, felt superior to others, and showed no remorse for causing pain. In his videos and writings, he referred to the victims as useless and weak. Dylan, on the other hand, seemed more vulnerable. He suffered from severe depression, had low self-esteem, and expressed feelings of emptiness and hopelessness. Some experts believe he also showed signs of borderline personality disorder. Despite their differences, both had one thing in common. Neither sought professional help. Neither the school, nor the parents, nor the doctors recognized the warning signs before it was too late. Eric and Dylan began exchanging violent ideas from a young age. They connected through online games, internet conversations, and growing social isolation that separated them from the rest of their classmates. The dynamic between them was complex. Eric exerted emotional control over Dylan, influencing his decisions and reinforcing his dark ideas. For Dylan, Eric was a guide and an emotional anchor. Later studies suggest that Eric was motivated by revenge and a desire for power, while Dylan seemed to want to escape from a reality he considered painful and meaningless. Experts indicate that Eric displayed characteristics of malignant narcissism, a dangerous combination of egocentrism, cruelty, and complete lack of empathy toward others. Dylan, on the other hand, showed signs of self-destruction, which may explain why he agreed to participate in a suicidal plan. To him, the massacre was both a cry for help and the end of his own suffering. The home videos recorded by the two are a chilling window into their minds. In them, they laugh, joke, and plan murders with coldness, almost as if they were filming a parody. This absence of emotion during the recordings catches psychiatrists' attention. It shows extreme emotional detachment, something unusual even among violent criminals. Some specialists believe that constant exposure to violent video games and horror movies contributed to both boys becoming desensitized to others' pain, although this topic remains debated among psychologists. It is important to remember that no official diagnosis was made about the two boys, since both committed suicide. Many of the conclusions are based on personal records, testimonies, and observed behaviors. Understanding the motivations of Eric and Dylan is essential to prevent similar tragedies from happening again. In the next session, we will explore the legacy of the Columbine massacre and how it forever changed the way we view school safety. The massacre at Columbine High School was not just an isolated event. It became a turning point. From that day on, nothing was ever the same in the American school environment. Before 1999, few schools had clear protocols for dealing with shootings or serious threats. After Columbine, this reality changed radically, and security measures began being adopted nationwide. Surveillance cameras started being installed in hallways and entrances. Metal detectors appeared in many educational centers. Teachers received training on how to act in emergency situations. Furthermore, so-called lockdown drills became part of the school routine. Students learned from an early age how to hide, protect themselves, and stay silent if there is a threat inside the school. State and federal governments began investing in anti-bullying prevention programs, mental health support, and psychological assistance for at-risk students. The goal was to prevent vulnerable youths from following the path of Eric and Dylan. But not all changes were positive. Many parents and experts protested that schools became colder and more controlled, virtual prisons instead of spaces for learning and freedom. The case also sparked intense debates about gun ownership in the United States. Many wondered how two teenagers managed to get access to such deadly weapons and why no one stopped them. After the attack, movements calling for stricter control over the sale of guns, especially to minors, emerged. However, to this day, this topic remains deeply polarized. The press also began discussing the concept of the Columbine effect, meaning how the attack inspired other youths to commit similar crimes, seeking notoriety or revenge against society. Cases like the massacre in Suzano, Brazil, in Parkland, United States, and several others show that the trauma of Columbine still resonates around the world, unfortunately. Documentaries, books, movies, and theater productions continue to be made about the topic. Each new generation seems to return to the events of 1999 to try to understand what happened and why. Many families of the victims created funds and NGOs dedicated to preventing school violence and providing emotional support to youths in crisis. These initiatives form an important part of the legacy left behind by the tragedy. Today, when we hear about a student writing something violent in an essay or posting concerning messages on social media, the first question that comes to mind is, could this be another Columbine? This shows that, although we have made great progress in terms of early detection and prevention, we still carry the shadow of fear that Columbine brought into our lives. And that is precisely why we talk so much about this case. Not only to remember the victims, but to ensure that stories like this never happen again. In the next session, we will conclude our script with important reflections and a call to action to involve you as a viewer. More than 2 decades have passed since the massacre at Columbine High School, but even today we still feel the echoes of that tragic day in our schools, news, and even on social media. What happened on April 20th, 1999, was not just an isolated crime. It was a dark reflection of the social, emotional, and cultural tensions that many youths face every day. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold were teenagers like any other. They had dreams, frustrations, and difficulties. But something failed in the system, whether in the family, in school, or in society, and that allowed them to reach the extreme. Today, we live in a world where technology connects us, but often isolates us. Social media can be a source of support, but also of bullying, comparisons, and constant pressure. That is why it is so important to be alert to the signs. A student who is too quiet, a sudden behavior change, violent messages in notebooks or online videos. All of this can be a silent cry for help. Teachers, parents, friends, and even classmates play a fundamental role in this story. Sometimes, just listening to someone attentively can prevent a wounded heart from taking an irreversible path. We have also learned that violence generates violence. Glorifying attacks like Columbine only fuels the cycle of pain. We must be careful about what we consume, share, and reproduce. Many of the youths who commit similar acts are seeking recognition, power, or simply an end to their own suffering. This shows how much we need to invest in mental health, empathy, and psychological support in schools. The legacy of Columbine should not be fear, but a warning. A reminder that we must see each student, each child, with respect, attention, and care. The changes we saw in educational policies, school safety, and the debate on gun ownership are part of this evolution. But there is still much work to be done. Each new generation faces different challenges. Today, we have children growing up in a digital world where the boundaries between reality and virtuality blur. This requires new forms of protection and guidance. If you are a teacher, parent, mother, or friend of someone who seems to be suffering, talk to them. Do not underestimate the importance of an honest conversation, a hug, or a "you are not alone." And if you are going through a difficult time, remember that you are not alone. There are people willing to help you. Health professionals, support lines, help groups. They are all ready to listen and support you. Finally, if this content touched your heart, leave your support here. Share it with someone who needs to reflect on these topics, and comment your thoughts. What do you think? What can we learn from this story? And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do it now and turn on the bell to receive notifications of new videos. We have exclusive content, impactful stories, and in-depth analysis that will keep you informed and engaged. Together, we will continue discussing important issues and transforming knowledge into action.